What is up, guys? Don't forget to subscribe. I made a small error on one of the parts of this tutorial. What you'll want to do whenever you're in the trigger zone to pick up your item, you want to have it actually like this. You want to have a control sensor in your trigger zone. With your trigger zone, whenever it's detected, you want to make it to where it powers on your control sensor. Now, whenever you press square with your control sensor, or whatever your item pickup's going to be, make it to where the keyframe is on keep and it powers on your timeline. It powers on your timeline. At the end of your timeline, what you want to do at the very end, you want to make it to where there's a keyframe that powers off this keyframe, powers off the control sensor, powers off the trigger zone. It powers off all three while it's recording. So just hit the power button, make it to where the recording powers off, all that stuff. And that should be it. You can also try this AND gate method, make it to where the trigger zone, put it into the B and make it to where square is in the A. You can try that also, but I'm not sure if that'll work. This right here is just how I have it right here, but I know the keyframe method will work. Just have this on keep changes. Alright guys, let me know if there's anything you guys need help with in the comment section. Let's begin the tutorial. What is up, guys? Do not forget to subscribe. Check out my channel playlist for individual tutorials on logic, sculpting, animation, music, and more. The most important thing for creating grabbable items in Dreams is the animation itself, making the transition from the item becoming invisible to visible flawless. And that's pretty much the most important thing, depending on what kind of game you're going for. Now, I think they may have another way to do this in the future. There may be a more improved gadget, but it's still important to know different ways to do things, because that way, some situations you might not be able to use the gadget that they may improve the game upon, and you may only be left with this method. Dreams has a vital amount of ways you can explore and actually do things. So first, before we even begin, I want to show you what a good transition looks like. Now, I got this puppet. There's still some things I had to improve upon with their animations, but for the most part, it is flawless. That's the animation I made. Everything else they created. So see how it all looks flawless, how it's all moving with the sculpture. There's still some things, again, I'm going to work upon. As you saw, the jitteriness, that's going to be worked upon. But for the most part, we have a grabbable item in Dreams. So let's show you guys how to actually do that for your enemies and for your characters. So this will be what you would do no matter what. But for your character, you'll need a controller sensor. Then whenever they're in range of that object, let's say there's a trigger zone, you press square within that trigger zone, then it would start the animation and turn off the main character's ability to walk with a keyframe. I'll show you how to do that here in a second. Or you can disable the controls with an on-off switch and a keyframe. That's my favorite way of doing it. What you would do is put that keyframe that disables all that in here with keep changes on. You see keyframes can record things like that. It can record button presses, it can record the changing of numbers, and you'll want to do that to where your character can't move while he's grabbing the weapon. Then you'll want to put that on keep changes, and you want to put that at the beginning of your animation. That allows you to transition from a invisible weapon to a visible weapon. Now, you might not understand why I'm saying invisible weapons. There is a reason why I'm saying that, and I'm going to show you why I'm saying that right now. So here's how you can see invisible things in Dreams PS4. Notice that this item is already a part of this sculpture. It's just that it's invisible and it's not seeable, not collidable until you grab the item and the keyframe changes it. So you don't want it to be movable, you don't want it to be visible, and you don't want it to be collidable because invisible things can still collide. You don't want this on either. You can adjust the density of your weapon if it's a sword or a gun. I imagine the density would be a little bit different or higher for those kind of things. And then you can mess around with other settings like that. Whenever the animation starts and the transition looks perfect, looks good, that's when you want to have a keyframe change this to visible. Now you don't want to make it collidable yet. You want to make it collidable after all of this has ended and there's nothing touching the weapon, because when there's things touching the weapon and the weapon can collide with it, it can mess up animations and stuff like that. You want your puppet animations, and I'm saying this loud, you want your puppet animations perfect before you even start, otherwise it's going to get in the way of a whole lot of things. You're going to have to restart it over and over again. So make sure your puppet animations, the animations in the controller microchip, are perfect, the ones that you're going to be using. Make sure that the visibility, the keyframe you use for visibility, has keep changes on. That's this. That means that it'll keep the changes of visible and it won't turn right back off. And then after everything is done, after your weapon is not in range of anything it can collide with, that's when you want to turn this on with a keyframe also that has keep changes. And you don't want it on movable. So how do you actually get the item within your puppet? Well, after you've sculpted your item, or if you have an item you like in the Dreamverse, save your item. Save your item. Save your item. Next, you want to press L1 and X on your sculpture. Search for that saved item you saved, or search for a weapon that you're trying to use. This is my favorite way of doing it because it's a whole lot easier. Like it just seemed like every other way that I do this, it didn't work, but this way seems to work for me 100%. And pretty much grab that item that you want attached to your puppet, or the item that you sculpted in your creations. You would have to look it up in your creations. And this is the one that I'm using. And then you'll want to pretty much place it somewhere on here. However, you're not done yet. And you have to be sculpted in. See this red arrow and see the blue palette at the bottom. You can kind of see it right there. And you just press L1 and X to scope in, then search for it, place it, then place it in the right place. Then after that, what you'll want to do is press L1 and X, then L1 and X on your hand, then click on the weapon. Then you'll want to group them together. You'll want to group them together. The reason you're grouping them together is because that allows it to do this. It allows you to make slash animations. That's why you're grouping it together. You're grouping it together. You can either group it together after the grab animation. I like doing that because then I can see exactly where the item is going to actually be pulled from and stuff like that. Or you can do it before if you want to do it that way. If it's not too, if it's not a complex animation and you don't have any place that you want to kind of mentally check mark where it is, so that way the animation looks flawless. And you can look up my animating tutorial. I'll have it up at the top up here. There's a lot of ways to animate, guys, so look up as much animation tutorials on Dreams as possible, that way you guys can make flawless freaking animations, guys. So after you have all your animations done, after you've scoped in, got your object that you saved, this is how you save it, by the way. Save it as a new creation. That's how you would do it. That you would see that. And after you've linked them together so you can make swing animations and stuff like that, Next, it's actually time to work on the swing animations and things like that. Before we start, I'm going to show you guys how you would make this item selectable if you saw it and then you needed to walk up to it. So we're going to go ahead and talk about that also. What I would use is either an impact sensor or a trigger zone. So let's say that your main character is within this trigger zone. You have a tag inside of its puppet microchip, a tag within the puppet microchip. Press L1 and actually see a microchip at the bottom along with the blue circle, purple circle, and then put a tag in there, name your tag, and then put this on tag, put the tag name right here. Then whenever it walks inside of here, make it to where, trying to think, the square button is plugged into the power, or whatever button you have that makes it to where it selects, plugged into the power of the trigger zone. Now this is a way to do it. You'll want it on possessible or remote control. We're going to change it to possessible real quick, just so we can do this. And then whenever you press square, what it's going to do is turn on that thing. That's what that does. And whenever it's on, you'll want it to, under detected, make it start the timeline for your grabbable item. Make it start the timeline. Again, animating is the most important part for grabbable items. Now, again, when the timeline starts, since this works as a cutscene, this is technically a cutscene, pull out a keyframe, have the keyframe on keep changes, have this keyframe turn this your main character's control sensor to none, and have it on keep changes. At the end of the animation, let it turn back on with a keyframe. Turn it back on to either possessible or remote control in your controller, what is it called? Control sensor settings. That way you can move your character again. And then make it to where your weapon can collide. Your weapon can collide now. Just make sure there's nothing that will make it to where your main character is stuck. And that would be a way to get the grabby. Now you'll want to make your animations for swinging. Just make your animations for your attack, whatever your attack button is. Have that start up the animation. And while the animation is in effect, you could make it to where your main character, its control sensor is on none, so it can't press any more buttons, or it disables the controls. Or you can use a signal manipulator and check out my single button press tutorial if you need to know about signal manipulators. But technically all it is a signal manipulator will change or manipulate your signals to where your signals, if they look like this, they'll be like this instead. That's what a signal manipulator is for. It can do all sorts of other things. This is how you make combos also. You'll want to plug that in there. Plug this part right here into the power of your swing animation, your attack animation. And then set this to this and mess around with these settings right here. I've kind of forgotten which one you would use, but I'm sure it's one of these 4. It could be any of these though. And then sometimes you'll have to raise this up in order for the animation to completely complete. It could be this one also. It's pretty much giving more strength on this side to where it'll give enough power to this signal to start up your animation. Next, it's time to learn about collisions. While it's swinging, that's when you want to make this thing collidable. You want to give it a proper label, whatever it hurts. If it hurts a bad guy, make it a weapon. If it's an enemy doing it, make it foe, I guess, or whatever tag you have for foe for damage. And you'll also want it to turn on your collision settings within the animating swing timeline. Don't have that one on keep changes. That way it'll turn back off on collidable. It'll turn after the animation's done. This will switch off as long as the ending of that animation, as long as it doesn't reach to the end of the timeline, if that makes sense. This should turn off right here for your weapon. L1 and X on the weapon, L1 and X again, then L1 and square. Have this turn to collidable. It'll look something like this. You'll pull out a timeline. You'll have your swing animation up here, right? You'll have all your swing animations up here. If you're layering it like Photoshop, then you'll have a few rows. Then you'll want to upsize it. You might not want it all the way to the end. You can try it, but sometimes it stays on forever if you do that. Then you'll want this on collidable. And it should already be on visible because that animation where you grabbed kept it on invisible or visible with keep changes. And this right here should not be movable. And you don't want this one on keep changes. And you want the proper label for it, because this is what the impact sensor, we're going to be using impact sensors for damage. That's how it's going to detect. So make sure that weapon has its own label. And this makes it collidable for this duration of your swing. Now for the impact sensor. Impact sensors sense impacts of labels. So this is how you're going to be taking damage. Choose the label of your weapon, so whenever your foe or your main character senses the impact, if it's an enemy doing it, senses the impact, make it to where it's only those labels that are selected, and then through touching sends a signal to take damage with a health modifier and turns on your hurt animations and your knockback animations with either a force applier. This is how you do knockback, either a force applier, a mover, or even through your puppet interface. This is how you can do recoil. You can mess around with whatever setting you like. The force applier, mess around with labels, just mess with the labels. Mover, make it go backwards. If your character's pointing forward, make the direction backwards. And you can also use a follower if you want to have a tag within your puppet microchip and have that tag directly behind your character. Then make the touching turn on that follower. Then your character should knock back into that dot as long as it's behind your person. Then don't forget to make it to where the damage is also applied through the health modifier. Variable, you can do health with variables, or even a counter. With a counter, this should be connected to increase count. I think using counters is the easiest way to do health, so I might have that tutorial up here, my easiest way to do a health bar tutorial. And that is pretty much it, guys. That is pretty much it. Just have the impact sensor inside of your main character, your enemy's microchip. And this is how you make grabbable weapons in Dreams PS4. Ask me any questions in the comment section if you're confused about anything, as this right here is one of my longer tutorials to make sure you guys get the idea of items in Dreams PS4. Again, I think this is going to update in the future, and there may be a way to do it with this also, the grab sensor. Let's look through it. I believe this right here is just for the imp grabbing it, like, you know, the imp. I thought this would be how you grab things, but there might be a way to do it. Like, let's say you know, the imp is possessing something, there might be a way to pull that off. So I'll look into this also. There might be a part 2. Again, they could also make more gadgets for something like this. Animations are the most important thing. Then putting the visibility of your weapon turning visible at the proper spot so that way it looks good. That's the next important thing. Making the transition and your animations flawless. The third important thing. Making your animation perfect for it. Don't forget to subscribe, guys. I hope this helps. Let me know if it helps. Let me know if you need more help on this. And I hope you guys have an awesome day.